Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series for financial advisors. Today's episode is Diversity as a Superpower, a Goldman breakaway on building a firm from 0 to 400 million and beyond. It's a conversation with Allan Boomer, partner and chief investment officer of Momentum Advisors. I'm Louis Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for financial advisors.
At Diamond Consultants, our mission is to help advisors live their best business life. We want every elite advisor to find exactly the right place for their business and their clients to thrive, whether it's at a wirehouse, a regional, boutique, or independent firm. As the industry's leading recruiters and consultants, we've transitioned more than $250 billion in assets under management in the past decade, and each year, 25% of transitioning advisors who manage $1 billion or more are our clients. If you'd like to talk, please feel free to give us a call at 908-879-1002. Are you a financial advisor who's curious about whether you're in the best place to serve clients, or if there might be a better way to optimize your business for the future? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a new book that serves as a self-guided journey, walking you through the key steps that Diamond Consultants takes with our advisor clients, whether considering change or not. Visit diamond-consultants.com/thebook to learn more.
Many of the most successful advisors start off in a place unlike the world they practice in. For Allan Boomer, discussing the stock market at dinner or reading the Wall Street Journal wasn't a part of his upbringing. However, hard work and strong family values were the major factors that influenced his formative years. In high school, Allan joined a corporate internship program that offered him a summer position at Merrill, and that changed his life's trajectory. Allan recalls how his colleagues had family or friends they can call on to build their books, but as a young Black man in a working class community, he didn't quite have the same reach. After graduating from NYU's Stern School of Business, he landed at Goldman Sachs and dug into his strong work ethic and determination to build his experience and his book. Allan took several leaps of faith over the years, ultimately leaving Goldman and much of his book on the table to become a true fiduciary. For Allan, like many other advisors, the reality that he wasn't actually a true fiduciary to his clients was a real wake-up call, one that he felt compelled to answer. Allan wanted to serve clients of all levels in a way he could not at the boutique firm, and he wanted to build a 100-year business that could become a home for diverse advisors, a firm that clients could trust to do the right thing for them. Today, Momentum Advisors manages $400 million in assets with 10 employees. Allan has dynamic energy and a firm sense of his vision and sees diversity as a superpower. In this episode, he shares how that vision drives him, his growth, and his team, and offers a perspective that is equally relatable and unique. So let's get to it. Allan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Love to be here, man. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Why don't we start off, if you can just share with us your background and how you found your way into the industry to begin with.
So I am one of these guys that really got lucky landing in the financial services industry. I did not come from a household where we talked about the stock market or the Wall Street Journal at the dinner table. I grew up in suburban New Jersey, where my parents are from the South. My dad worked at UPS for 32 years. My mom didn't go to college. And I was forced into the workforce very early. I say forced because it wasn't my choice. My parents said, look, you're 16, you go get a job. And I was working fast food. I was working at Burlington Coat Factory. Back then, minimum wage was $5.05. And a program called Inroads came to my high school, and they said, we can help you to get corporate internships. And I just said, how much does it pay? And it turned out that if I got a corporate internship, it would pay $8.50. And I said, sign me up. And I did not know what I'd be doing. I did not know the difference between one industry and the next. In fact, the Inroads program promised to set us up with no more than 2 or 3 interviews. I did so badly in my first 3 interviews that they gave me, but they still liked me. So they gave me a 4th, they gave me a 5th. My 5th one happens to have been with Merrill Lynch. And I don't know how, what they saw in me. I don't know how I got the internship. I showed up an hour late for my interview because I was given the wrong address by another intern. It was a bad story, but lo and behold, They gave me the job offer as a summer intern coming out of high school, and I've never left the industry.
That's a very cool way to find your way into it. I agree. It's different than the norm. We have a lot of folks who grew up in the business world or had aspirations to be in finance, but every path is unique. And that's what makes your story special and one that we're excited to talk about. And we'll dive into the launch of your RIA, Momentum Advisors, throughout the episode. But just for some early perspective, can you share a little bit about your firm, Momentum Advisors, the size of the firm, and anything about your value proposition?
Yeah, sure. So we are I would say a mid-sized RIA firm. We were founded 12 years ago. In year one, we were managing exactly $26 million. Today, we're just under $400 million. We have 3 offices. We're in New York City, Long Island, and New Jersey. We represent about 300 families and nonprofit institutions all over the country. We have about 9 employees at the firm. A couple of things that are unique about our firm. So number one, we are a firm of young and diverse talent. I am in my mid 40s and I'm one of the oldest people at my firm. Also, our leadership team consists of women and minorities, which is very different than our industry. But some of the things that make us different, I think we do a really good job at understanding and listening and helping folks to express themselves through not just their investments, but also their financial decision making. We've been able to grow a ton, and it's been all organic. Like we grew from 26 million to just under 400 million in a short period of time. We have not acquired any books of business. It's been 100% organic. We've not brought on any advisors that had substantial books of business. We've, in fact, taken advisors who did not do well at other firms, and we've helped them to learn how to go out and build a book of business, and we've helped them to become successful. And that's been a unique differentiator for us.
Yeah, I would say. And we'll also dive into the diverse angle of your firm because I'm with you. You hit on 2 aspects of the industry, female and minority, which are not overly represented within our industry. So it's really interesting and exciting to see your firm grow so much as it has and to be so successful, and to talk more about how other firms maybe can replicate some of your playbook in that regard. So let's rewind the tape. You said you started at Merrill in the summer internship, and then you were at Goldman Sachs starting in 2003. Why'd you pick Goldman Sachs, and what was it like to learn the business and grow a business as a private wealth advisor at such a honorable and venerable institution like Goldman?
Great question. I was really young when I started as an advisor. I was like 26 years old or so. And couple that with joining a firm where, in order to have an account, at the time, the minimum was about $5 million. By the time I left, it was $10 million. And I didn't come from a wealthy background. I had classmates who could call in their parents' friends. I could not do that. In fact, a lot of my business school classmates thought I was absolutely crazy for going into a field like wealth management, but not just wealth management, period, but like the high net worth, the ultra high net worth end of the business. But I did really well because what I've realized is that folks are looking for people who care about them in terms of advisors. Folks are looking for folks who care about them. Folks are looking for advisors who are knowledgeable. And even though I didn't come from a wealthy background with a silver spoon in my mouth, I had work ethic, I had drive, I had determination, and there were a lot of things that I had in common with the folks that we were going after at Goldman. And I did really well there. Just to put it in perspective, Goldman Sachs every year hires folks from all the top business schools. So my year, I was graduating from NYU Stern School of Business. There were classmates from Harvard and Wharton and Yale and Stanford and all the top business schools in the country. And there were 40 of us that got hired from all these top business schools. And by the end of 2 years, they promoted 10% of the class, or 4 of us, to VP. And I was one of the 4. I was the only Black person in my class. There were mostly white men in the class. There were a handful of women, 1 Asian person, but really not a very diverse class. And I was able to do really well despite not having the typical background for wealth management.
It's really hard for any advisor to start in the industry, but especially if the barriers to entry at $5 million or $10 million investable assets is the entry point, it's even harder to gain momentum and get really wealthy people to trust you when you don't have a lot of experience. So think back to how you got your first client. Like, what was the strategy or strategies you used to begin to build your book and begin to serve the ultra wealthy individuals in the country?
Sure. I will say this, like starting at a place like Goldman did give me a leg up in some ways. Goldman only had 330 people or so doing my job across the country. In the New York office, there were only 70 people or so. When I think back to the advisors at places like Merrill Lynch, there was a lot of competition for clients right across the hall from you, right across the desk from you. If someone was calling on a client that had just sold a business, Goldman would make sure only one person called. I think a lot of other firms, they would let anybody call because they figure if 10 people from Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley call, then there's a 10 times higher chance that we'll get the business. But like starting at a firm that really cared about making sure that not everyone was beating down the same doors, I think was really helpful. Also, a firm that was in the high net worth business. That's the nature of that business. That was also a good thing. But for me, my first clients, I did a lot of cold calling. I did a lot of networking. But my first client was over $100 million. And
Wow.
I just thank God, man. Like literally, I was in the right place at the right time. And I met a woman who was looking to make a change. And I always say, when you're building a book from scratch, there's a little bit of luck, a little bit of God's favor involved. And that's certainly the case for me. If you and I, Lewis, start the same day, the same company, calling on the same types of people, and you get successful and I'm not, it's not because I did so much better than you. Sometimes you just get lucky and find the people who want to make a change. That was me. I was able to find folks who were in transition, folks who decided that they wanted to get a new financial advisor. But sometimes you're calling on folks that are, I call them walking around rich, WAR. It's like going to war, and it's not easy to get those clients.
I agree with you. So you were at Goldman for a number of years. You left in 2010. So it seems like you built up a really nice book of business. The Goldman brand and setup, boutique nature was beneficial to you. What motivated you to leave Goldman at all? What were some of the frustrations or pain points that led you to leave?
Yeah, sure. One thing I'll say, Lewis, this is one of these moments again where my story is very different than the typical RIA founder. I built up a really successful book of business at Goldman. My book there was about $400 million. The clients that I brought in myself was about 250. And when it was time for me to leave, I figured if I could get 30 or $40 million to come with me, then I could have enough income to really have a firm. Out of $400 million, again, 250 was mine, 150 was clients that I got from other sources that were more attached to the firm. And I figured if I could get just 20% of my 250, I'd be good. I walked out of Goldman Sachs with $7 million.
Wow.
I did not leave and bring a book of business. My book of business today does not really resemble my Goldman Sachs book of business. I had to start over, and that's atypical, right? I think most folks are starting with a derivative of the book of business they covered at their original firm, not me. And what's funny, if I had known that I was only going to leave Goldman Sachs with $7 million, I'm not 100% sure I would make that bet that I could do it. But what I didn't realize, and this is like the mental thing that folks need to understand if they're planning to break away or if you're a new advisor, it's not the client that's valuable in your business plan. It's not the existing assets. It's not the revenue that you used to generate. It's you. It's the ability that you possess to go out and build a business, to go out and give good advice. That is the best thing that you're bringing to bear. So the thing that really pushed me was one day I was watching the CEO of Goldman Sachs testify before Congress, and Maxine Waters, who led the Financial Services Committee for the House of Representatives, she was interviewing and accosting all the Wall Street CEOs and saying like, look, we're coming out of this financial crisis. They wanted heads to roll. They wanted someone to be in trouble for this. And she said, look, there was this transaction, Goldman, where you told one client to buy this thing because it's going to go up. And you told another client to sell this thing because you think it's going to go down. And she asked, like, didn't you have a fiduciary duty to look out for your client's best interest? Now, at this point, it's 2010. I entered the financial services world in 1995. So I'd been around for 15 years. I'm fully expecting my CEO on national TV to say yes. And instead he said no. And I'm like, no? Maybe he read the teleprompter wrong. Like maybe, I'm sure he's going to clean this up. But instead he doubled down. He said, no, our clients are big boys and big girls. They know exactly what they're getting themselves into. It's not our job to look out for their best interest.
Wow.
It is our job to give them a fair price for things that they want. And that felt like someone had scratched the chalkboard or like someone had dropped glass. I didn't know that we weren't fiduciaries. I didn't know that Merrill Lynch didn't have fiduciary advisors, nor Goldman, nor all the other firms that we now compete with. And I quit that same month and ultimately started Momentum. I did spend a year and a half with another RIA firm that was started by a mentor of mine. But ultimately, I knew that I needed to be in an environment where I could sit on the same side of the table as my clients, where they will know that I'm always giving them advice that's in their best interest.
Yeah, that's a very powerful story. And not every advisor can point to one moment that kind of is the inflection point of where they say, you know what, this isn't the right place, I'm going to go. Oftentimes the buildup of a number of different things. But let me ask you two follow-up questions from what you said. The first one is, I think anyone listening is saying, man, you had a $400 million book and you expected ideally to bring 30 or 40 million in assets, ended up being less. But even 30 or 40 million in assets, you felt excited and still had the same conviction that even if I bring 20% of my book, or whatever the number was, that this is the right thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. Because for one, I'm entrepreneurial at heart. I said to myself, and I literally had to do a lot of soul searching before leaving, but I said to myself, if I could earn $1 working for someone else or 75 cents working for myself, I'd rather take the 75 cents. And that's who I am. And I didn't realize at the time that the dollar I made for someone else could end up being $1.50 down the road. I was good to take the 75 cents. And I took less than 75 cents for years. I took 40 cents, 50 cents on the dollar while I was building up the RIA firm. And things are way better now, but there were some lean years in there for sure.
That's the ultimate leap of faith. The other follow-up question I had was, you mentioned the charge to be a fiduciary. From what I've seen from representing many of the industry's best advisors doing this podcast, is that most good advisors, even if their firm is not technically a fiduciary and they're governed by the suitability standard that FINRA says firms abide by, that they still hold themselves out as a fiduciary, and they themselves are only going to recommend solutions that are best for the client. Even if the firm says, hey, you have to sell this to make a higher grid or do this or do that, the advisor, the traffic cop, sits in the middle and says, I'm only going to do what's best for the client. Did you feel like you didn't have that same ability at Goldman? Like there were pressures to not do as best for clients, or was more just philosophically like, I don't want to have my name attached to a firm that doesn't believe what I believe deep in my heart?
You brought up a really good point. And if someone had asked me at that time, Allan, do you have a fiduciary duty to your client? I would have absolutely said yes. And in the decisions I made as an advisor at Goldman, I always tried to think about what's best for the client 100% of the time. But we also have to recognize a couple things. For one, Goldman's not a bad place. Like Goldman's a phenomenal firm, and I'm not denigrating them in any way. But like I had to think about, how did I get paid? I got paid a little more if someone went into a risky investment, a little less if they went into a safe investment. I got paid more if someone went into a Goldman Sachs product, a little less if they went into something on our open architecture platform. And even though in my heart, I may not be thinking about those things, I'm in an environment where this is how the pay scale works. I'm in an environment where there's my CEO on TV who's making this statement. And I'm in an environment where if we got sued and someone said, hey, you weren't looking out for my best interest, the firm lawyers would stand out on my behalf and say, oh, we weren't required to look out for your best interest. Like your best intention may not be good enough when there are painstaking steps that are taken by firms to make sure they're not counted as fiduciaries, right? Like it doesn't matter what the advisor wants. And it's really what's on paper. It's what's going to hold up in court. And like, look, I'm not talking bad about our entire industry. I'm just saying that like firms can choose to be fiduciaries. Like it ain't like it's something that you can't choose, but firms have elected not to be. And if you've elected not to be, then you take everything that comes with it. And if you want to be on the side of right and be a fiduciary, then do it. Then convert your firm from a brokerage firm into an RIA firm. Except that it comes with not being able to charge different fees for the same exact product. Except that it doesn't come with the ability to get paid more if someone buys an internal product versus an external product. Like, accept everything that comes with it, because I know for a fact, Lewis, and this too, like, not everyone with money is sophisticated. And that's one of the challenges with how the laws are set up. Like, I knew for a fact when I was at Goldman, one of my clients, his mom died and just happened to have bought a lot of insurance. This kid was 18 years old and a college student with millions of dollars in the bank, but no level of financial sophistication. I had another client. She divorced a billionaire. She herself was a fashion model. She knew nothing about investments. Her husband did all that stuff. She was my client. She had $100 million. It doesn't mean you're sophisticated. So what I'm getting at is, like, investors need to know what they're dealing with. They need to know when they're dealing with a fiduciary and when they're not. And when they're not, then the guard needs to be up. So for me, I take this very seriously. I don't want folks representing that they're a fiduciary and they're not.
Right. I can hear the conviction in your voice. I had another question I was going to ask. I'm going to ask it anyway. I think I know the answer. You can tell me skip if you want. But when we see advisors leave Goldman, it doesn't happen all that often, but it does happen. I'd say 60, 70% of the time, they'll go to a Morgan Stanley, a UBS, Merrill Private Wealth, more of a mainstream financial institution. Certainly back when you left Goldman in 2010, the RIA channel, the independent wealth space, wasn't nearly what it was today. Was there any thought to taking the easier road? And my guess is back then, super young advisor, diverse, built up a book of close to 400 million in assets, you would have been a hot commodity. You could have gotten paid a bunch of money to go there. You would have had a big name on the business card. Did that cross your mind whatsoever? Or was it, I'm going to go into the fiduciary model or bust?
Pass. No, I'm just joking. It's a great question, man. Like, I had multiple 7-figure offers to go to all the firms you could think of. And the thing that, like, I'm a little bit of a contrarian, like how I look at investments. Like, if everyone's doing something, like, should I be doing it? You know what I mean? And like, you're right. At the time, if Goldman lost 10 advisors, 8 or 9 of them went to other firms. A very small percentage started their own firms.
Yep.
One of my good friends, Justin Berman, he's down in Atlanta. He built a nice $1 billion RIA firm out of Goldman. There was another team that left from one of the California offices, the San Francisco office. They built a nice firm. But on average, it's rare. Like, most folks took the big check, the 7-8-figure check, to go somewhere else. For me, again, the contrarian in me said, well, if I know that Wall Street is all about valuation, they typically want to buy something for a discount. And I said to myself, if these firms are willing to offer me 7 figures, like, that's a lot of money. I must have something that's pretty valuable. And it made me want to hold on to it and capitalize on it myself.
I love that perspective. I don't think I've ever heard anyone frame it that way. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and knowing where the profit incentives are, et cetera. If a firm is willing to pay you this much money, one of two things is true. One, you're missing something and they're making money in different ways than you'd expect. Or two, they're getting a really good deal and they're going to make a lot of money at the expense of you. So it makes complete sense that you had such conviction to go into the RIA fiduciary world, even before it was as mainstream as today.
Yeah. And let me add one more thing. I got really lucky to land a mentor who started an RIA firm. So my mentor, a gentleman named Ivan Thornton, he worked at Credit Suisse as an advisor for years. He left in 2005 to set up Fiduciary Management Group. And that's when I first left, that's who I went to go work for a year and a half. And had I not known him, had it not been for everything I learned from him, I never would have known that this was possible. And what's crazy, I've met like one of my old colleagues from Goldman who also left, around that same time frame to start a firm. And people thought he was crazy when he did it. And when I see him, because he has an office in my building in New York City. And when I see him, I say, hey, his name's Dick. Dick, what do you think about being an RIA? He's like, man, I wish I had done this 20 years ago. And he did it in 2005, right? I think that the idea of creating your own firm and having the infrastructure and support from our industry, it's very compelling. And for those who've had the guts to do it, I think there's tremendous rewards for doing it. And I do think
Definitely.
those big firms are going to come back around. I get offers all the time for folks that want to buy or roll up Momentum into their firm. And I've got the same view. I'm like, look, if you want to buy us, then we must have something special and I want to hold on to it. Our goal for our firm is to be a home for diverse professionals in this industry for the next 100 years. And so we're not looking to sell. We're looking to just keep getting bigger and better.
Awesome. Well, you gave me a natural segue into two key topics that I was most excited to talk with you about. Because in understanding most firms across the industry, the two things that stood out to me about Momentum was one, the diversity, and second, your thoughts, we'll say not controversial, but your maybe slightly contrarian thoughts on succession and selling the business. So first on the diversity topic, it's no secret, look at the data, anecdotally, et cetera, that our industry is very homogenous. That might be an understatement. I have to imagine that this fact presents challenges to you, but also opportunities as a business owner and as a very successful practitioner. Can you talk a little bit about this dynamic and how it impacts your business and how it impacts you personally?
Sure. I love giving the Olympics as an example. If you look at the Olympics, you're seeing representation from across the planet. And there's literally no race, there's no group of people that has an advantage over the world in terms of talent. What the Olympics teaches me or teaches us, if we're paying attention, it's the idea that talent is evenly distributed throughout the world. Opportunity, though, is not. And if there's an industry like financial services, there's an entire group of people, whether it be women, whether it be minorities, it's obvious to me that you're missing out on some talent. And so for us, like our diversity is our superpower. Like we've been able to find incredibly talented people that no one else is really checking for. And as a result, we're out here kicking butt. And when I look at the industry, I just say that the more firms are not diverse, the more they're going to, I think, become like the horse and buggy in our industry. I think they're going to eventually find it that they can't keep up as much. And I'm not being arrogant or anything like that. I just think that you've got to evolve your business. And if you're missing out on whole swaths of people, like you're not going to do as well. And so for us, like our diversity is a big strength. And, I think the old argument for diversity was that people want to work with folks that look like them. I'll tell you, our client book doesn't necessarily look like us. People just assume that we're a young Black firm. Our clients are all young and Black. Like, nah, like we have a good amount of young and Black clients, but we've got a good amount of old white clients. We got a good amount of all types of clients. And it's just because folks gravitate towards people for different reasons. It's not as simple as let me match my gender or match my race and let me go out and find someone that looks like me. In fact, I see very little of that. I see more folks that want to work with someone that will help them to express themselves better. Someone who may have something else in common with them besides race and gender and sexual preference. I wish I had a picture of all of our clients. They are so diverse. I think that's the world of wealth. Like the world of wealth is diverse. And it's not that you've got to be diverse so that you look like your clients. It's because that's what the world expects. That's what the world hopes for, is to work with a firm that has talent from a range of different backgrounds.
Well said. And you said that you think diversity is your firm's superpower. How does that manifest itself? Like, how does that help the business grow or help your clients?
Like I said earlier, we found some really talented people and they've got really good ideas. We've made folks successful who came from outside of the industry, who folks would have never expected could do well in this industry. And they bring really unique perspective. And it allows us to just connect better with folks. Like we have a really big institutional client base, for example. Those institutional clients are foundations and endowments and nonprofits. And a lot of those folks, they don't have a financial services background. They are working in a variety of different industries. And if someone is speaking to them in this financial speak and throwing jargon, like they're not going to connect with that person. And so part of our diversity superpower theme is the idea that we've brought folks that can speak plain English to people.
Hmm.
And that helps us to connect with people a lot better.
Well said. So, what do you think are ways that the industry can more effectively attract more Black professionals? It sounds like it's something you personally are passionate about. And you said that Momentum's goal is to be a home for diverse talent for the next 100 years. But obviously, you're only one little part of the ecosystem. Do you have any thoughts on how the industry as a whole can begin to tilt the scales of diversity in our space?
Yeah, sure. I think for one, there needs to be more representation. I know it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg type of thing, but I think Black folks need to see more Black folks in the business. I think that's one aspect. That means that firms need to make it an imperative to be very open-minded into how they recruit. That means that they may need to have initiatives that are specifically designed to target certain employment populations that have been overlooked. I think it means that firms need to also make sure that folks feel welcomed when they come. And what I mean by that is like, don't invite me to a cookout and don't talk to me when I get there. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't look at me strange because I'm dressed differently than everyone else at the cookout. And so so number one, I think there needs to be representation. And I think if you're going to invite people into your firms who are different, then you can't expect them to be the same as you. Like, you can't look at them funny for different things that might be cultural to them. The next thing I think firms need to do is, again, be a little different in how you do your outreach. If this were a client population that you were going after, you'd have no problem going after that client population. Like, you'd come up with strategies, you'd have alliances with certain organizations, you'd have a game plan and you'd execute it. And I think it's the same thing for diversity. But I think additionally, Black folks need to understand that like this is an industry that wants us there, that needs us there. And that comes from the representation. It also comes from, again, some of the things I mentioned that will inspire folks to want to be connected. But I think our industry just has a problem in general. Like the fact that the average age of an advisor, like Louis, you probably know better than me. What's the average age of a financial advisor?
I think it's 58. The last I saw, might be older.
That's a problem. We've got to not just worry about diversity in terms of ethnic background. We've really got to worry about diversity in terms of age. And that demographic matters as well.
I agree with you. In hearing you talk, the way in which to attract younger folks into the industry, but also more diverse people, like two different populations of folks, sometimes there's an overlap, but it might be a similar solution, which is younger folks need to see more younger folks in the business. You need to attract people in a different way. You need to make the role more in line with what they identify with. But I think ultimately too, it's how important is it to affirm into the industry? And if it's something that's really important, I think many of the ideas you laid out are a great place to start.
And I'll bring
but still a lot of wood to chop.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll bring one more idea. We've got to stop pigeonholing folks into these small areas. Like if you're young, then we need to help you go after young clients. Like we all know that like the young clients don't really have a lot of money, right? Don't just assume that the Black person needs to only go after Black people. Don't just assume that the woman advisor needs to go after women exclusively. I'll tell you that I've had a lot of success from just being not pigeonholed. Like I met early advisors who'd say, hey, you go after the Black ones, I'll take the white ones. Like that's like a microaggression, but like it's bad strategy. Folks aren't looking for their advice that way. They're just looking for folks they can connect with. And I think so for me, if I bring on a young person and we have a ton of young talent at our firm, we're exposing them to everything. Like we're not limiting them to the young clients. Like what I found as a 20-something-year-old advisor calling on folks with hundreds of millions of dollars. Like my last client at Goldman sold the business for $330 million cash and walked away. And that's after taxes, and wired me $100 million to pick stocks for him. And this guy was old enough to be my parent. And like what I found generally is that older clients really like younger advisors. How come nobody's talking about that? And like the fact that like you're young is not a disadvantage in any way with going after really wealthy younger clients. Right? It's not a disadvantage at all when going after really wealthy older clients. In fact, it could be an advantage. Like what I found when I was calling on clients when I was at Goldman, they liked the young hustler who reminds them of themselves, who may remind you of yourself when you were younger, or your grandson or your son, or they saw something in you that just inspired them and they liked your energy. I had an older advisor one day ask me like, hey, why would someone pick you when they can pick me? And I think he asked the question to be mean, but it was actually a really powerful question. And I thought about it for a while and I said, oh, I know why. Because you leave work at 4 o'clock every day. Because you're probably going to be out of the business before this person retires. You're not going to be around to help their next generation, right? And I'm not being mean, but I'm saying like, I've got some advantages as a young person. And it's all about perspective. And I think our industry needs to do a better job of expressing that different perspective to younger people.
Yeah, as you're talking to, something that just came across my mind is if every firm and advisor is reading from the same playbook, like you said earlier, if you're a Black advisor, you're only going after Black clients. If you're an older advisor, going after older ones. If a wealthy client is meeting with 5 different advisors and 4 of them look the same and come from the same socioeconomic background, if you can come in and impress them, and you automatically are standing out because you're already different. So I love that. It's a radical new way to think about differentiation. And so instead of the assumption that people want to work with people who look like them and only more experienced people can work with the super wealthy, it's coming at it from the standpoint of, well, I'll stand out. I'll be different. I have intangible benefits because of my race, because of my age, because of my experience that someone else might not have.
It's so obvious, man. Like, think about who your doctors are right now. Do you have all white men as your doctors? Probably not. Think about where you shop for food at the restaurants where you eat. Do you only go to restaurants where the chefs are all white men? And I'm not trying to be mean or anything. What I'm saying is, like, in every other aspect of our purchasing behavior, we're not doing this racial or gender matching. And yet somehow our entire industry has decided that in this space, we've got to pigeonhole folks to folks that can do some gender and ethnic matching. And I just think it's funny. And the more the firms do that, the more firms like mine are going to do well.
Yeah, that's spot on. You're taking something that many people could see as a disadvantage or a way to really hurt a business, but you make it a positive. You find it as a way to distinguish yourself and to work with the right clients that want to work with you for the right reasons.
Yeah, look, the last thing I'll say is this. Like, I know our industry is growing at, I think probably, what's our growth rate for RIA firms, Louis? What would you say?
I'm not positive.
Probably like, I don't know, 6 to 10% a year, which is really strong. It's higher than GDP. My firm's growing at like 25% a year. I can't give you all the secret sauce, but I'll tell you, like, being young, being diverse, and thinking differently, it helps.
Yeah, well said. Another topic that I wanted to talk with you about, I got this from a panel that you and I were on earlier in 2024, but it was a panel about M&A, and you were on the panel as the true contrarian, basically saying, I'm never going to sell, and we're just going to keep running this business. You mentioned it earlier, part of how you think about it, but I have to imagine your door's getting knocked on multiple times a week from private equity firms, roll-ups, and everyone in between that would love to partner with you or acquire you. So I wanted to ask you about how you think about the long-term future of the business. Eventually, you're going to want to retire, you're going to want to cash out, or maybe a really good offer comes around. How do you sort through all of this in such an active time for M&A in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that most folks who got into this space as founders of an REA firm did it because they wanted some of what comes with owning your own business. Yet what we're told constantly is, hey, you don't want to worry about all that back office and managing and picking of investments. You don't want to worry about that. Just sell your business and come and we'll take care of all that stuff that you hate. And it's like, well, like, I'm good over here. Like, the thing is, like, there's a quality of life that comes with owning your own business that I don't know if folks fully appreciate. There's the money that you can make is really good owning your own business. There's not having to answer to a boss. You got a lot of bosses, your clients, but not a corporate boss. It's you being able to do business the way you want to do business, where you want to do business, with whom you want to do business, that stuff is really valuable. And I'm young. As I mentioned, I'm in my mid 40s. I'm not trying to sell and then work for someone for 20 years. Like, I'd rather make that decision in 20 years. But we're setting the groundwork right now. We've got younger folks coming into the business. We have a killer 23-year-old right now who's going to be great. Like, he is being groomed. He's been with us. Actually, I guess he's 24. He's been with us since he was 21. He's 3 years in, and he is being groomed right now as a 23-year-old to one day run our business. We as the partners will be able to sell our businesses to the younger generation with one promise. Like, we got to get to that 100-year mark. Like, our goal is to be a firm that is a home for diverse professionals for the next 100 years. Now, maybe that changes one day. Like, maybe our industry cleans up its act and gets better at diversity. And maybe we don't need to be this singular home, or maybe there's other firms that are also homes. But right now, I don't feel like the industry is very friendly for Black folks. I don't. And I want there to be an option for folks. And I want to be one of the places, maybe not the only place. So for me, it like that matters. Like, that is my why at this point. It started out with really just wanting to be in a better position to take care of my clients. And we're doing that. It's evolved to wanting to be the best place for our clients generally. And then where it is right now is wanting to be a home for the advisor that has been mistreated in our industry.
What's really cool is you use your business as a conduit or a mechanism to better the world around you. I think a lot of people start businesses or look at their business that way, but it doesn't have such a strong personal connection. And my guess is you'd probably agree that you think with your role in the business and using momentum as your vessel, you can do better in the world than if you were just on your own and you weren't affiliated with the company. Is that accurate?
More or less. There are great firms out there doing great things. Don't get me wrong. I don't know that I'd be able to have the impact I'm having on the world.
Yeah, you're using your business to create not just an impact on your clients, but also on prospective folks coming into the industry and the like. That's very cool.
Yeah, my hope is we're inspiring someone else to do it, to know that they can do it. Just like my mentor, who happens to be Black, he started out in 2005 in this business. And if it weren't for him, I don't know that I would have even thought that I could start a firm. So I want to be that representation for someone.
Well done. A couple more quick questions for you. Thinking back to the founding of Momentum in 2012, and then looking where we are now in 2024, what were some of the gaps in capabilities, product access, and the like then? And how have you seen things change over that period of time?
Yeah, I'd say from the beginning to now, ironically, we had our company retreat yesterday, and we walked through the timeline of what did the firm look like in 2012 versus what it looks like now in 2024. Some of the big differences, for one, we have a lot more people, but we also have a lot more technology. In the beginning, we literally had 2 pieces of tech. Now we have 14 or 15 or 16. And we're now going through the process. We created a tech committee to now get us back to a more critical set of maybe 7 or 8 things in our tech stack. But technology has been a big changer for us. Like, we went from doing financial planning on the back of a napkin effectively to now using software to help us to make sure that we're systematizing things like technology. We went from not having a CRM at all because we didn't need it. Like, a one-man shop or a 2-man shop doesn't necessarily need a CRM. But when you are doing things like in the media, or when you've got strategic partnerships with organizations where you're getting referrals every single week, it can become very overwhelming. And like, we've done a great job at creating a brand for ourselves. Not everyone's heard about us, but for the folks who have, they're really compelled to want to do business with us. And our CRM really helps us to keep things on track. We've landed also a bunch of workflow improvements. Like, we've also, I'd say, developed a sales process today that allows us to go from intro to I'm signing this client up in about 90 minutes. And that's crazy to me. Like, when I think about like my days at Goldman cold calling, like, I'd spend my nights writing down the names of businesses and Google searching for people to call. I'd spend my days making phone calls. And my sales process might take 6 months to land $1 million client. We're now in an environment where folks are finding us on a regular basis. And when they do, we can get them from start to finish in about 90 minutes, or maybe at most 120 minutes. And we've got the steps. And we know when we deviate from those steps, it then puts you back in that world where it could take you 6 months to close a piece of business. So systems, tech, people, those have been the big changes since we started. But I will say access to product that's the simplest thing in our space. There are a million firms out there throwing you a million investment opportunities. It's up to you to know how to decipher which ones are worthwhile for your clients, but those have been out there since inception of the firm.
Yeah, but I think that part's only expanding. And now we're seeing firms like Goldman that were so exclusive and closed architecture, allowing for an RIA like Momentum to use their custody solution and access the platform. Just as a random example, we've seen that the access that RIA advisors have is significantly stronger than it used to be. There's tons of banks that cover the space. Most of the big firms have RIA institutional coverage desks, the research, the amount of private investments. But I think all of it's enabled by technology. We've had recent episodes with Case and iCapital in Hamilton Lane, where just looking at alternative investments, the technology advancement that makes it easier and more accessible for clients and advisors to use is ultimately what's knocking down the walls and makes it so that an RIA like Momentum has similar and in many ways better and more open access to anything and everything a client may need.
Yeah, those are all great examples. The challenge, though, I was on the website for Michael Kitces, and he has this map of all the different tech solutions that are out there.
Gets this fintech map. It's crazy.
It's crazy. And you could draw a similar map for investment products. That's a challenge for folks that don't understand investments. And I will say, like, one of the biggest advantages that I have personally is that I've earned an MBA in finance. I worked at Goldman Sachs during the financial crisis, which was a great chance to really see a full market cycle and really the worst of what financial markets can produce. So I hope the worst. I hope we don't get something worse than that in the future. But not every advisor's had that opportunity to work through a full market cycle. Like, a lot of folks are spoiled, frankly. Like, we've been in markets that have gone straight up. They didn't feel what it felt like to be an advisor during that lost decade where the S&P 500 was effectively flat for 10 years. And having lived through a few different market cycles, having started a firm right after the recession, it really puts you in a strong position moving forward.
As a client and a user of financial advisors, I want the market to keep going up. But I'm with you. That experience helps advisors weather these storms and normalize things for clients. Let me ask you two last questions. First one is, if you can go back to 1 year before you launched Momentum and then 1 day before you launched the firm, what would you tell yourself?
That's a good question. 1 year before, I was not thinking about it at all. So maybe I would have given myself a little bit of encouragement that, hey, maybe you should think about starting your own firm. I just wasn't thinking about it. Like, when I was at Goldman, I thought about being there for 100 years. When I joined my mentor in his RIA, same thought. I thought about being there for 100 years. And once I started the firm, it was almost like out of desperation, really. Like, my mentor and I, as much as I still love him and we still talk to this day, like, we had a big disagreement about how we wanted to do business. And that was on a Friday. Over the weekend, I packed up my office, and on Monday, I'm borrowing a desk at a buddy of mine's firm and starting Momentum. And like, Momentum started literally with no money. I went on a website. Like, it's funny, I spent the whole weekend thinking of firm names, and I literally stayed up all night, and like, Momentum Advisors hit me at like 7 a.m. after being up all night. And when it came time to make a logo, I didn't have money to go to a graphic designer. So I went to a free website where you could design logos, and I designed a free logo. I found the least expensive place to build a website, and I wrote up all the copy myself. I did it out of desperation, really. So if I could go back to 1 day before I started it, I would just say, look, man, you could do it, and it's going to be way better than you ever envisioned. When I started my firm, I really envisioned starting out with 30 or 40 million dollars and maybe one day making it to 100 million. Now we're at 400 million. We actually never even got to 100 million. Like in 1 year, we went from 75 million to 175 million in a single year. I'm in uncharted territory right now in terms of what I had in mind versus what's actually coming to fruition. We did a little financial planning exercise on our firm at our retreat, just like you do with retirement cash flow for a client. When you say, if the market gives me this rate of growth, if I contribute this amount each year or each month, here's where I'll be at age 65. We did the same thing for our firm, where we assume a certain amount of new assets every year, a certain amount of market growth. And it's very clear we're going to be $1 billion firm soon. It could be in 3 to 5 years. It could be in 5 to 20. I don't know, but we're going to be $1 billion firm. And that's something I never thought about before.
Yeah, you're playing with house money now, right? You've already exceeded all of your goals and expectations. So it makes everything a lot more fun because you've already far surpassed what you thought was possible. And now it's time to go to the next frontier that you never thought was possible.
Absolutely. And I tell the listener, whoever's watching this video, if you've got a newer RIA firm, or if you're an advisor at a big firm and you're thinking about breaking away, or at any firm and thinking about breaking away, I'll just tell you that you can do it. It is possible. It is almost like a no-brainer that you should be starting a firm. It's almost a no-brainer that you can be successful and make the firm way bigger than you ever expected. And I can say this having done it, but I can also say it knowing that I serve a God that's just amazing, that can move mountains, that can cause seas to part. And what I believe in the word that says I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And I hate to get religious, but this is my view. And whoever your God is or your higher power, I just believe that you can be way more successful than you ever envisioned.
Any other words of wisdom or encouragement or any parting thoughts to share before we wrap up?
Sure. The final thing I'll say is just a quote that really changed my life. I got a card from one of my aunts when I graduated business school. And the card had a quote from Maya Angelou. And the quote simply said, "Don't make money your goal. Instead, pursue the things you love to do and do them so well that people can't take their eyes off you." And that's my parting word for you, the listener. It's been a great time hanging out with you today, Louis. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
That was the best last answer you could have given. I think that if you don't have that on a bumper sticker, you ought to. I think that's the charge that everyone should live by.
Great.
Amazing. This has been really interesting, very different than most of our interviews, but just hearing your perspective of leaving Goldman and pretty much starting from scratch 2 different times, growing such a successful firm, using momentum as a vessel to better the world, how you look at diversity as a superpower and not a negative, and all the great things you have going on at the firm. I think all of our listeners really benefit from your perspectives. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
As a financial advisor, you hold yourself to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, and credibility. You are successful because you take your professional responsibilities seriously and are dedicated to your clients. But are you living your best business life? Are your goals aligned with your firm's, or could a better option exist? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a book written with you in mind. It's a self-guided journey that walks you through the key steps that we take with our advisor clients. This strategic thought process and roadmap to professional self-discovery is designed to help you ask the right questions and think critically and objectively, whether you're considering change or not. Learn how to get your copy at diamond-consultants.com/thebook.